Hey everybody, how are we doing? This is Illinois Kid coming back with my draft analysis for the Platinum Draft League for the current season. I do believe we're on season 6 at this point. Hope everybody's doing well and had a nice holiday. And welcome into this draft analysis. So, a couple of housekeeping notes. I think this is a really interesting team I got to put together for this season. I'm really excited to be participating. I don't plan on losing too much this season, I'm not going to lie. We haven't actually taken home a championship yet, and I was telling everybody I was going to go undefeated. And I'm definitely going to work towards that goal. Obviously, it's a bit of a tougher one, easier said than done, but I'm going to be putting in a lot of effort each week. This is going to be my main draft league, and in a sense, the kid gloves are kind of coming off. I've been playing with these guys for a while, and I've always had some other project going on. Not to downplay any of their play, there are a lot of great battlers in here, and I've definitely been bested by many of them. But I'm definitely going to be giving it my full effort this season, is all I wanted to say there. So, coming into this draft, it's a lot of the same standard rules. 1 tier 1, 1 tier 2, 2 tier 3s, free points, whatever have you. And I was picking at number 5. And I was trying to decide what would be the best mon to fit my draft capital, so I can go off that kind of a team and start going down that sort of path. I had a mon on my mind that I thankfully got since the start that I figured that it would kind of fall to me, because I actually went undrafted in the previous season, then I just went and took it at 5th overall. Also, apologies about the sort of, laziness here. I'm going to hide this actually so you can see. Got the Raikou in the background here. Not too much editing, just got some music in the background. Just kind of talk about mons, looking at showdowns. So if you're interested in a nice, long, in-depth draft analysis, albeit a little boring, go ahead and hit the like button for me. All 20 of you that are watching this. And let's go ahead and get into it. So that Pokemon I was talking about that I really wanted to see if I can build a good team around was Kyurem Black. A lot of my friends have drafted this in the past, so I've had the joy of getting to prepare with it, through another lens, not actually get to use it myself. And something I've held true about Kyurem Black for a really long time. For a long time in the game, it actually really didn't have any defensive checks. It's monstrous attack stats sort of allows that, and the best part about this set of stats is it tailors so much freedom to an offensive game plan. It's honestly insane. The 170 is very high without, I believe that's around the base 120, 125 range without investment, no nature or anything. So we can invest a lot of special offense and utilize its deeper special coverage with moves like Freeze, Dry, Focus, Blast, Earth Power, and then still hit really hard with a base 120-ish, albeit not stab, but base 120-ish, maybe Life Orb boosted Fusion Bolt. So it just offers so much synergy with a lot of different team compositions. I can go a lot of different ways. I'm not limited with Kyurem Black by any means. Covers a big typing a lot of people like, Dragon, and a bit harder of a typing to find in really good mons in Ice. There are mons like Kyurem and Mamoswine even. Also, maybe you could argue for like Alolan Ninetales, Weavile of course, but not too many premium Ice types in Draft League, and a lot of people find themselves grabbing an Ice type that isn't great just to have the typing because it's so good against Bird Spam. But now we get to have that in a top-end mon, and we get to build a lot around this mon, and I'm really excited to do so. The problem with Kyurem and what I'm going to need to look for is to cover its many weaknesses. It has a total of 5. And the fact that it's so easily revenge killed is kind of a problem because it's quite slow. It does pick mons off, but then it's very easy for a faster mon to swap in, maybe a faster fighting type, and then force me to switch. Could even force coverage moves, things like that. So I need to be aware that this mon does have those limitations, and I need to be able to draft really good, I won't say stall, but a really nice defensive core that allows me to slow down the game and play it at my own pace. As well as finding Kyurem a really nice partner to revenge kill when it goes down, or even grant it initiative a little bit faster, granting initiative so Kyurem can come in without having to utilize its great defenses, and then kind of trade hits versus take one coming in, be slower, take another hit, and then retaliate. It gets really low HP at that point, so it's going to be about counting my turns and getting Kyurem in the best possible way that it can to do a lot of work, because it really is unstoppable once done so. So my next mon to sort of immediately pair with that faster initiative is a tier 1 Mega that I take quite a bit. It's probably my best used Mega. Mega Lopunny. So much experience with this. And I used it back when I considered it nerfed. Before it had the, all of its coverage it gets. The trade-off for the new generation was it lost return. But you don't have to use high jump kick anymore. You can use close combat instead. And it also picked up triple axle, U-turn, I guess play rough is whatever. I'm probably just going to click triple axle, but those two are really big for me. And then, of course, the close combat edition I talked about. I would consider Lopunny buffed, especially with the Scrappy buff, now that it ignores Intimidate. But it's so great at grabbing initiative for mons like Kyurem and other wall breakers that I'm going to want to pick up. It's a great partner with Kyurem for its pressure against steel types between Earth Power from Kyurem and Close Combat from Lopunny. People can have a really hard time utilizing steel types against Kyurem, which I find to be one of its greatest counters. Its other great counter, however, is Fairies. And Fairies are going to be really, really good against me with these particular two if we don't address those sort of needs. Picking up some good Fairy resistance, some good Fairy counters, because, Fat Fairies can just switch in. Maybe I guess wrong on a turn and I don't go for Iron Head, or they come in on a really good close combat, for instance. It's a good resist for them. They can force me out. I have to then predict and all that, and I could be put in a bad situation. So it's really nice to target that Fairy weakness early and often in this draft. And I'm going to be trying to build a defensive core. There are some good Fairy resists, but more so if I find a Pokemon that I find can deal with a certain type just because it's neutral to it, I'm going to roll with it. And that's going to kind of summarize this next defensive core that I have, the next two mods I'm going to draft, because I wouldn't necessarily say these mods have a plethora of resistances. They have a lot, and they're not necessarily geared towards Fairy. But I will say that with these two, I have set a really nice base for the rest of the draft, and it's going to be really, really hard to stop what I kind of want to do, which is kind of stalling out the game, allowing these two to put in a good amount of work, and generating offensive pressure, and even my more defensive mods. That's going to honestly start with Gliscor. That was my next pick. Bit of a disclaimer here. We talked a little bit about it in the draft. I did not realize this mon was actually granted as a tier 1 this season. I don't really want to talk too much about it. I don't want to make it seem like I'm upset. I was at the time, but it was my mistake for not making sure that I looked at the draft doc and confirmed that this mon was indeed still tier 2. I've been doing draft for a while, and Gliscor has never been tier 2, which is why I assumed it wouldn't be this time. But it was this season. I need to be more mindful of things like that, checking out the doc before I, go to draft. So that was definitely on me. But we do end up with Gliscor. Whether tier 1 or tier 2, point limitations or not, it is a really, really solid mod to start a defensive core around. Big fighting resist for the top 2 is really good. It still is weak to that Ice Punch, so fighting types are still a problem because a lot of them get Ice Punch right. But we're going to try to, work with that as we go down the board. But 4 starts, it still gets U-turn as well with Lopunny, so grabbing initiative for Kyurem even more so in my next couple of picks. I'm not going to have a lot of Volt Turn this team. I believe I only have 4, and one of them is a tier 5. But I think with these top 2 and the other mon that I'm talking about, it's going to be enough for me to have it on at least a couple mons a game. I know I typically like to have it on 4 or 5. I know that's typically my playstyle. But I'm trying to cut back on that as much, because there's a lot of great mons I'm not utilizing just because they don't get initiative moves. So I'm going to try to cut back on that this draft and experiment. I think it turned out really well. But just to keep talking about Gliscor, it does have added setup to generate pressure in that sense. It does have still a really nice 95 base attack stat, spam Earthquakes. And it's just a really good base to the defensive core, as it is a rocker and a defogger, which can be really hard to find throughout. I'm not going to go crazy with it. I'm going to pretty much consider myself fine with Gliscor and the only other mon that I'm going to get with hazard removal, simply because it's not as powerful in this generation. Hazards aren't. It's just heavy duty boots are a really big addition. They're just a really powerful way to mitigate rocks weaknesses, and it's really good to have to ignore webs and spikes. So I'm gonna run into that quite a bit, and it's gonna be pitted against me quite a bit. So probably just gonna utilize boots instead of worrying so much about defog. But I'm sure I'll try to fit it most weeks. But that's Gliscor. I think it's gonna really pair beautifully, and it really gets crazy when you add my next pick into the mix, which is Suicune. I cannot you know, I did this thing is legit broken. I cannot what's the word for that? Overstate that enough. I think it's very, very, very good in certain matchups, and the reason why is because it probably does the best job of any of the bulky waters of just slowing down the game for me in ways of the Crocune set or even just Fat Rest, and just allowing me to take my time with my turns, plan my damage accordingly, and then even so, generating offensive pressure in itself with Calm Mind. I mean, no other Mon checks as many boxes as this. It's ridiculously fast for how fat it is at base 85. A lot of Mons have to run speed investment to outspeed me, which I know they're probably going to run that anyway, but there are a good amount of fat breakers that we're going to be able to outspeed with minimal speed investment, and then still get to invest in base 100 HP, which, by the way, is out of range of subs breaking our Seismitoss breaking our subs, which is a big deal. And then just a fat 115 in both defenses, just allowing for so much versatility with Gliscor, which does often run physical and special defensive sets. We have that now with Suicune. We can really tailor make our defensive core each given week, just as well as we can tailor make our offensive core with the top two. So, very, very excited about the Suicune pickup. It's going to add a lot to the team. I already have really good ideas for it for some of the coaches that I've been theory building for. Had a lot of time thinking about that. So, I'm really, really excited about those two. We're going to go ahead and move on to the next pick. Very early for this Mon, may I add. Very early for this, but I think it's going to provide quite an impact, so you do get these mods kind of early. Also, a little one-dimensional Chandelure is definitely a little one-dimensional. I have a very little in my notes to talk about for this, but it supports Kyurem and Suicune, you know, quite greatly, I would say. Just adding more pressure for steel types to add with Lopunny, just continuing to beat that dead horse, being a great fairy resist for the top two. You know, base 90 in both defenses is nothing to sniff at whenever you talk about a resisted attack. So Moonblast are going to kind of bounce off us, and then we're going to be able to fire off big 145 Ghost or Fire moves respectively, which, you know, Fairies might not be able to handle. Probably won't be able to handle it, because it even gets Energy Ball for the Fairy Waters if we do decide to go that route. So just adds a lot in that aspect just offensively. It's a very basic job that I need this thing to do, right? It's also great for initiative, like with Lopunny and Gliscor, just being able to filter into it without it taking damage is really nice. And it's just going to help me take that next step towards building a better offense, because our top two hitters right now are physical. Kyurem, I'm going to be investing in special attack quite a bit, don't get me wrong. You guys are going to think Kyurem's a both attacker, right? Hopefully, like, utilizing special and physical all on the same set. I doubt I'll leave behind mixed sets very often in this season and commit to one solid offense. I'm probably going to be investing in both, just the way I see this team working out. Just a little tip, since you guys are going to be going against me, might as well tell you all my secrets, right? But no, this is a really nice Mon to add here. So, a little early for a one-dimensional Mon, but I think I've made my case on why I find it important. Next up, we do have our Fairy type, Grimmsnarl. And Grimmsnarl has been a mod I've been wanting to get my hands on for a while. It's really nice that I get to have it now. It's such an excellent type combination for, one, not being fighting weak. For the likes of Kyurem and Lopunny, and still being a dark type. 2, being a dragon and a psychic immune for those two, mind you. A great ghost resist for Chandelure. It just checks so many boxes just in a typing perspective. And it adds more setup too. We do get access to bulk up a nasty plot on a prankster set. There's also Frisk to identify items for Kyurem and Lopunny. Scarf sets are going to be really important. Finding Scarfer is going to be really important. And I'm going to see myself bringing Frisk. Probably almost as much as Prankster, I can see them coming quite a bit. I actually am unfamiliar with his other ability. Pickpocket, yeah, never going to use that. So, yeah, definitely really good. Does add even more physical offense. We are a little top heavy in that aspect. Our special attackers are 90 and 140. And then, of course, Kyurem. So maybe we try to gear more towards special offense throughout the rest of this draft. It's also just screens, I suppose I should mention as well. I really try to avoid mentioning obvious things and basic things, like of course it gets prankster screens. A lot of people know that about Grimmsnarl. I like to add more of an in-depth analysis as to what the roles I find these mods doing, and this mod is definitely going to add to that support role, add to that slowing down with the screens, giving me information with Frisk, and then also in some aspects it's going to help me burst through fat teams with prankster setup. So just such an excellent find, a great round out with Kirim and Lopunny, and really excited to continue to build around it just in this draft, even though I've already done so. Next up, another bit of an early one, I guess. This would be the 7th pick, and we're going to be picking up our steel, nope, not Brionne, our steel type in Bronzong. Bronzong is pretty huge. One, I love this thing. I have drafted this thing. This is probably my most drafted defensive mod. I usually find my way drafting this thing. Not so much as of late, like with PDL, but when I first started my draft career, this was a crutch for me. Almost as much as Miltank is, as you guys might know. I use a lot of Miltank. And Bronzong, a lot of times I'll just pair those two together, Miltank and Bronzong, and just watch the low tier core put in so much work, and I'm really, really excited to get this mod back. I just needed to pick up another rocker, even more of a Psychic and Ice resist as well, for the likes of Gliscor and Lopunny, and almost said Chandelure is weak to Ice. No, but just really for Lopunny. I guess that's really the only Psychic resist we picked up thus far. Good drafting, Brandon. But yeah, really, really interesting how we're kind of developing that theme of Gliscor, Suicune, Bronzong, of these mods that have these mixed defenses and mixed defense capabilities so well, and it's just further increasing the versatility in the defensive core. We can tailor make any week, assess whatever threats my opponents have. We have a levitating steel type to be the best ground type check ever. We have excellent answers for ice types in Bronzong, and I kind of consider those three like a defensive core in themselves, and they are just so well to work so well together. Bronzong, a little less utility. It does add potential trick room for another mon that I'm going to talk about that I drafted later, and Grimmsnarl. But overall, this is just a pick to of course, the defensive core, and more of a testament to the versatility of it. Could have grabbed something like Steelix, that's really fat and has rocks, has a higher defense stat than Bronzong, but I'd much rather go with that Bronzong to add sort of that versatility and utility. And who doesn't love Trick Room Gyro Ball spam, right? So probably the steal of the draft, in my opinion, other than maybe Suicune. I got Superior at pick 8. I got to draft Bronzong, Chandelure, Grimmsnarl, all those mons before I went and got Superior. And the reason for that is because a lot of people are fading this mon because it lost Hidden Power Fire, and they feel that it gets walled by Grass and Steel. I consider that really only half true. It's vastly underrated and a great way to even further stall and generate more pressure. And how I mean is it has excellent natural defenses. In terms of its like speed ratio, because if it's a little bit slower and it just has those defenses, nothing that great. But because it's so fast, you can invest in these defenses and then still go before some of these slower wall breakers, sort of giving you almost like priority healing with moves like Synthesis or Leech Seed, which we'll be spamming quite a bit with this. Subsets are excellent, and between this and Suicune, we really have excellent ways to not only slow down the game, but generate offensive pressure, because my special attack is doubling every time I attack with Leaf Storm. So it's resists no longer become resists in some cases in certain matchups, and unless they're a grass type, they're going to be taking Leech Seed damage as well. Adds Defog, which is really nice, and it gives me another speed stat above base 100, further helping Lopunny out. I will invest max speed in this some matchups. It's not never going to happen, and my opponent does have to respect that and know that, along with the other above speed base 100 I drafted just for speed creeping purposes. But we also pressure those steel types and grass types quite a bit, right? We have great switch-ins to them with the likes of Suicune and Kirim for the waters. And I guess the grass within Kirim's case. We have great ways to pressure them with Earth Power from Kyurem, you know, ice moves for the grass types, close combating, triple axling with some of the top mons, you know. It's really not a problem that steel types kind of shut this thing out in a sense. Poisons as well can be a real problem, but that's not as common of a type to have a good mon, I'll say, in that category. There aren't a lot of great poison types, so it's really nice to build around defensive cores that have weaknesses of uncommon high-tier typings. But even in that case, we do still have Bronzong and Gliscor, which are great resists. So this just, I feel, takes my team to the next level, and why it's so good is because now we've invested so much in that offensive core and so much draft capital, and now we also have great mitigators of the game, slowing things down, adding even more pressure for stall. It's great stall breaker as well, because again, you know, I might not invest as much in special attack, but if it's doubling every turn, it really doesn't matter as much. I mean, eventually, you know, those fatter mons are going to start being into a KO range, especially on top of Leech Seed Chip and potential rocks. So it's just, Superior's really nice for this team. And then who doesn't love some fast knockoff, right? Who doesn't love that? Now, in this next pick, I actually drafted Cryogonal because I felt that the team needed more defog, but I had a bit of a realization, kind of what I explained earlier. You know, you don't really need it as much in this generation as you used to, in my personal opinion. And I didn't want to draft what I considered a not good mon utility, because Cryogonal doesn't really add much to this team, in my opinion, that Kyurem isn't already doing. So I wanted to instead grab Vikavolt out of free agency. This was supposed to be either I get Scyther or a tier 5 electric, but Vikavolt went undrafted, so I went back and picked it up. And this is the other Trick Room I was talking about. We have potential Trick Room with the Bronzong, Grimmsnarl, Vikavolt core, what have you. Just something else for my opponent to think about. It's great for bursting down Fat Psychics, another great way to do that. It adds to the Volt Turn core, much needed. Fat Waters also, that Gliscor and Suicune might have a hard time either breaking or stalling. Vikavolt's going to be great for that. Either I hit them really hard, or I Volt Switch into a ground type, and then Energy Ball because I have the Levitate ability as well. So just really nice pick here for this tier, and this is definitely a good point to optimize drafting, right? Like, we're utilizing these tier 4 and tier 3 spots, tier 5 spots, to not build our own little cores and say, well, I just drafted this thing because it has a great special attack stat. You know, finding ways to say, this is why I want this. This is the reason I want to throw this on this particular team. It is X resist for this mon. Also, the fighting resist for Kyurem. I didn't really think about that till now. But it's X resist for this mon. It helps this mon deal with this typing. It's useful because it provides webs for the team. A very simplistic way of thinking, but you know, it's all there. And once you start thinking about that and thinking about more diverse cores, you're going to see a lot of success in your draft building. Versus just a typing perspective. Why do I want these typings? Why is this type combination really good for my team? What does it resist? You know, versus just saying, oh, meet the team. Vikavolt has base 145 special attack stat, and it's good because it's a good special attacker. It's very baseline, very boring in my opinion, and doesn't really add much in terms of conversation. So that's why I go this in depth. That's why I talk about these things. I have notes for these specific reasons because I want to explain why I drafted these mons for the position I drafted them, not just because I want to tell you what they can do. So, a bit of a boring rant there on the Vikavolt section, but we'll move on. Only a few more mons to go. Next up is, oh, not Aggron. My tier 5 I elected to go with first anyway, which is Garbodor. Not much to say about this tier 5. It's just I wanted spike spam. You know, I wanted to get a good low tier fighting resist. Haven't picked up a poison type yet. Grounded, toxic spites, what have you. And I really wanted spike spam for this team. Very minimal roll, you know. Great grass and fighting resist. It's ground weak, but we have levitate. We have Gliscor, Suicune, you know. Not much else to say. It is great for bursting down like fatter grasses as well for Superior. And is, of course, bursting down fatter fairies. Not as much of a switch in though, because there's an inherent rule about fairies. Fairies get Psychic coverage, and Psychics get Fairy coverage. So a lot of times if I want to switch into that Moonblast, probably going to be taking a Psychic afterwards. So not the most viable Fairy resist in that sense. But there will still be some matchups where maybe they're physical and they only have access to Play Rough. So Garbodor could be a great switch in for that. So that's good for Garbodor. We're going to move on to the last two picks. These are definitely the most uninspired of the teams, sort of lazy. Regirock is second to last on my list here. Bulky rockers, as much I can say here. That's probably the only versatility it will add to the team. It actually shares quite a few weaknesses with a lot of my top-end mons, so not the best in that sense. But at least it does help support some of the lower-tier stuff. Fire resist for Vikavolt, right? You know, Chandelure supports it by being a fighting resist. And maybe like a... I don't even really need a bug resist. It's just mainly another kind of thought to think about is like Iron Defense Body Press, Curse sets. Oh, and good bird spam as well. Good for opposing bird spam. Like Hurricanes, Brave Birds. We have that in Bronzong to help us out quite a bit with that. Because we do have some bird weak mons, flying weak mons with the likes of like Superior and Lopunny. So it's nice to use these tiers to pick up some of those mons. It's low tier stuff. This is tier 4 in this league. Nothing too fancy to write home about here, but a solid pick nonetheless for the second to last of the draft. And arguably a little more useful is my last pick here in Dodrio. Now, Dodrio is another mon above base 100, which I figured I needed. I did have Noctowl initially in this spot, then I switched to Unfezant, then I went to Dodrio. Mainly because I wanted Defog at first, but I realized, you know, maybe having him on over base 100 versus a tier 5 defogger would be nice. It does add bird spam, which we don't have with Gliscor really. Gliscor doesn't have access to very many flying moves. It's still up in the air if we're going to be allowed to use dual wing beat or not. I've been told it's data mined and therefore allowed. I've been told that it's not out yet. I don't really know. It's probably something I won't utilize anyway on Gliscor, just the way I see myself running it. So it's going to be nice to have some kind of way to click Brave Bird on this team, and good knockoff is always nice. And then it adds Baton Pass to the team, giving us 4 total ways of initiative around our team. So pretty good in that sense. Only going to be running Early Bird, so the two abilities are... I think the Tangle Feet is technically banned because it's an evasive boosting ability, and those aren't allowed here. And then Runaway obviously has no competitive use, so mainly just going to be rocking out with Early Bird and this fun, semi-limited coverage. Does get Stomping Tantrum for Steel, so the jump kick loss wasn't too bad. And that's going to be the team, in a sense. This is going to be it. I think I built a really interesting team of excellent defensive threats and polarizing offensive threats. We are lacking a bit in the sweepers department. We're also quite slow, so revenge killing is going to be kind of a problem, and we lack certain hazard control. I would say those are the weaknesses, but those are mitigated by really good defensive switch-ins and good sort of stalling capabilities, blistering offense, just constantly getting those picks to force in those revenge killers, and then switching into a tailor-made defensive threat, whether it be Bronzong, Suicune, Gliscor, Regirock, Garbodor, even Superior some matches, or even good status. And then we have 2 good status absorbers I forgot to mention with a great Will-O-Wisp switch in Gliscor and Chandelure, and then of course a great Toxic immunity and sleep immunity in Gliscor because it's going to be poisoned already. So that's going to be the team. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I went a little faster than I thought I would, but I think I covered my points pretty well as to why I think this is going to be a really good team. Hopefully I didn't put too many of you to sleep. And if you are still watching this, I'm going to be doing the full season, hopefully. The last video I wanted to do, and the last series I wanted to do had to get canceled because the league got canceled. So I even uploaded the week 1 footage, and I never got to actually upload it because there was no point to, because the league got canceled. So this league has been going on for a long time, though. I very much doubt it'll get canceled. So we're going to be having some pretty fun content coming your way for my sort of revenge tour Platinum Draft. I'm going to win this year, and you know what? I'm not going to drop any games. We're just going to win every game. So thank you for watching. I've always been the Illinois Kid, and I will see you guys this season. For the rest of the videos. Take it easy.